Hi everyone, my name is Cynthia. Let's talk books, and today I'm here to talk about my favorite books of 2020, just in the general literary fiction genre. Actually, some of these books are classics, some of these are SFF, some of these are speculative fiction. So it's basically books that didn't fall into any of the categories for the other videos that I have filmed. And I also tried to organize these in some sort of list so that I could get to my favorite of 2020, and that has been extremely difficult. So I'm actually not really going to do that, except for the books at the very top, and I will tell you about those once I get there. So first, let me start by talking about some of the classics that I read in 2020 that really became favorites this year. The first one I'm going to talk about is The Lover by Marguerite Duras, and this is a really short book. It is set in Vietnam, and it's really a very autobiographical book because you're following a young woman in Vietnam, a young French woman in Vietnam, who is in a romantic and sexual relationship with an older man in Vietnam. In Vietnam, she is not wealthy, but she holds a lot of privilege because she's white, because she's French, and engages in this relationship with this man, even though he's older, because he's wealthy and because he can provide access to some things for her and for her family that they might not have access to otherwise. At the same time, that a relationship with her gives him a lot of privilege just for the fact of being in a relationship with a white French woman, a young white French woman. So there are some things in here that are icky for our modern sensibilities, but what I really enjoyed about it was the way Duras talks about it, the way she talks about this relationship, the way there's awkwardness throughout the entire book, and how emotional. I love Duras's writing because she writes in a very emotional way, or just in a way that really taps into my emotions and makes me feel all the feelings that the character's feeling. And this just very much did it for me. It was one of those books that I was just really happy to have read in 2020. The next book that falls under the classic category is The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. And this is a chunker, so the complete opposite of The Lover. But it is an adventure book with character exploration, lots of drama and intrigue. It's a book that's so expertly plotted, especially for the kind of length it has, that I was just in awe. You just can't help but really enjoy the story of it, and want to even know more about some of the characters that he doesn't completely delve into. The twists and turns in this book, my God, I just really enjoy The Count of Monte Cristo and can't believe I hadn't read it before. So yeah, I really enjoy it. I am planning on reading the nonfiction book based that talks about Dumas, Dumas's father, who was a count in black, and it's called The Black Count. I'll put a picture somewhere up here. But I'm planning on reading that one this year because I just really enjoyed The Count of Monte Cristo so much this year. Yeah. So, okay, those are, I think, the classics. Although if I screwed up and forgot one, another one might jump in there as well. Another one of my favorite books of 2020 was Who Fears Death by Nnedi Okorafor. Nnedi Okorafor is such an amazing writer to me. I love everything she writes. So she would fit better into what she calls the African futurist genres, because all of her books are set in Africa, in either real or imaginary kind of Africa, where magic is not only possible but a way of life. And in this story, you're following this young girl kind of from the time in which she is a child to the time in which she gets older, in which she is kind of figuring out who she is, what she can do in a society that is divided and it's in kind of at war. Right? There's these two sections, a kind of native colored part and a white region. The white colonial kind of power is clearly winning and terrorizing everyone else. But her mother had been raped by one of these colonial soldiers, and so our main character is the product of the sexual assault, and is very visibly, clearly a product of it. Everybody can tell because of her skin tone, and that puts her in an outside position in the society. At the same time, she's discovering the spiritual world and what that means for her, and how that world seems to be excluded for her because of her gender, of her sex, and how she must overcome so much in order to kind of learn about herself and figure out her role in all of this. It's amazing. Like, that description does not even do justice to what the story actually is. So part of the story, you're following the main character in the little town in which she lives, the relationship she has to her family, to the town, to some of the neighbors, and then you're on an adventure. She's on a quest to do something, and then the magic just explodes. It's wonderful. Lots of trigger warnings though for sexual assault, for female mutilation, for oh goodness, maybe I'll just have to list them down below because there's lots of potentially triggering topics that the book engages with, but I thought it did so quite marvelously, and I highly recommend Who Fears Death if you haven't gotten to it. The next book on my list is The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. So this is the first book in the, what is the series called? Oh my god. Broken Earth trilogy, I think. I'm gonna go with that because I'm like, why isn't it here? But this is a Hugo Award-winning book, and it is magnificent. Like, I get it now. I get why everybody loves N.K. Jemisin and why she is such a favorite in the SFF world. Like, this is an amazing story. There's a little bit of playing with time, and you kind of figure out how Jemisin is playing with time as you read the novel, and by the end it all becomes clear. So you're following these people in a post-apocalyptic world, and they are discovering their powers in a society in which the powers that they have are single them out as other. Oh my god, it's hard to talk about this book without spoiling everything. It is just amazing in terms of character study, in terms of world building. I can't wait to continue with this series, and to continue reading everything Jemisin has written. I really love this book, and think it's really, really great. The next book on my list is Exhalation by Ted Chiang, and this is the only book I read in 2020 that I checked out from the library and then had to go buy the physical copy of. I just loved it so much. So this is a series of short SFF stories, and a lot of them are kind of speculative fiction, but they just imagine entire worlds, and some of the stories are really short, but they pack such a punch, and it engages the theme of what is history, what is artificial intelligence, and how humans connect to artificial intelligence and technology, and what it means to be human, and what some of those human relationships are. I just cannot tell you enough good things about this book. Each story kind of deals with a different topic, but each one in this compilation is amazing. Like, I am someone who usually stays away from like short story or essay books, because they tend to be very hit and miss, and there can be a really great one in there and then some really not so great one. This one though, this Exhalation, just every single story was impactful for me. I'll put it that way. So if you're at all interested, please check it out. The next book on my list is The Deep by Rivers Solomon. Okay, The Deep is a deeply emotional book. I felt like it's very deep. It's the story of mermaids, and the premise is that what if all the black bodies that were thrown overboard on slave ships in the Atlantic turned into mermaids and got to live on. So the premise alone there kind of tells you this is, there's a lot of pain in this book. It's a lot about generational pain, generational trauma, and how a species copes or doesn't cope with it, and through following a particular mermaid who acts as a kind of historian, and she acts as like a vessel for retaining the memory that the mermaids want to maintain. It's a short story that is just like, I still think about the story sometimes, and like there were times where I was like, okay, what is Solomon doing here, or what's happening here, and then like it pays off in the end, and I was just really like blown away by the story and by the fact that it has stayed with me since reading it. So yeah. The next book on my list is Augustown by Kei Miller. So this is the year that I finally started, reading more Caribbean books, thanks to everyone that has put together the Read Caribbean month. I forget what month it is, but this was a book that I read for the readathon, and it was amazing. So it's set in Jamaica, that is divided. So this is a place that is divided by social class. It engages with the theme of colorism and how colorism and class intertwine. And you're following this family that lives in like the bad part of town, the poor part of town, the way that dreams and hopes get placed on the youngest in the family to do better, to get out of poverty, and then how those dreams can get derailed or delayed by life, by pregnancy, by children, and then how things from the past keep coming back, about the trauma, that pain that lives on different ways. There's a little bit of magical elements here that were handled so beautifully, because most of it is just set in a very real place, and it feels like a very realistic novel. And then when you get these elements of that are a little bit more magical, it just somehow fits perfectly. I loved this story, and I can't wait to read more from Miller. The next book on my list is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. This is one of my favorite books I read in 2020, and is very popular on BookTube. If you have not heard about it, I'll give you the quick synopsis. You're following Rin, who is a poor, darker skinned person from the kind of rural part of this magical world, or this different land that is basically a stand-in for China. And Rin is studying for these exams so that she can get into like the equivalent of a university. But people from her part of the country rarely make it into these exams. However, if she can get into the most elite military academy, she can go there for free. Like all the other academies would cost money, but if she can get into this military academy, it's free. So the first part of the book is all of the extreme measures she goes through to get into this academy. Then you get her time at the academy. This kind of it ends up becoming a kind of like those in school books, and then the very end is different. Like, I'm trying not to give everything away. Rin as a character, I just finished finishing the trilogy. So, like, Rin is such an amazing character. She is someone you want to root for, that because you see how she is working hard, climbing her way up this ladder, but she is making choices that are leading her down a very dark path. And a lot of it is about relationships, how relationships change. It's also about mystical elements and how the mystical and the earthbound world interact with one another. And it's also about war and the different kinds of violence that humanity can experience. Lots of trigger warnings in this book as well. I think I did a video just talking about this book that I will link down below if you're interested in more. But it's like everything everybody hypes up about this book was just real, and like it lived up to it, and it's really amazing. All right, we're getting to the end here. There's 15 books total on this list, but the last few of them, the last 4, belong to one author alone. So before I get to that author, I'm going to talk about Ghost Wall by Sarah Maas. This is a short, quick book, but it really took me by surprise. The premise is that you have this family of survivalists. They're trying to live the way that hunter-gatherers lived in Britain. So they take people to show them how to live this way up into the mountains. And you're following the story through the eyes of the daughter and the family. And so you're experiencing how crazy it is to try to live out this life, and how everybody in the family is affected by the choice made by the father, who is the one who's super into trying to be historically accurate about everything they do. The daughter, however, is at the age where she's questioning everything, where she wants to live a different kind of life, and how she's pushing back against the father. I honestly, I had read the premise of this book several times, and it sounded mildly interesting, and then I read it, and there's so much more there. There's a lot of depth. There's a lot of important themes in there, and it's just I really, really enjoyed it, and I was surprised at how good this book was compared to just what the premise sounds like, or what it sounded like to me at the time. But I just, like all the books on this list, highly recommend. I think it's amazing. All right, let's get to my top 4 books I read in 2020, because they're all by the same author. I clearly was really on a kick with this author, and that is Silvia Moreno-Garcia. Yes. So, a couple of these books were published before 2020, and 2 of them came out this year. So I'll start with the ones that were published before. So the first one is Prime Meridian. Prime Meridian is a short novella that is set in Mexico City. It's in a kind of near future Mexico City, where it's possible to travel to other planets, to other moons, that kind of thing. Space travel is possible. And our main character is a poor young woman in Mexico City, and she dreams of going to a different planet and starting a life there, and she's trying to save money for that, but at the same time things keep getting in the way. The way Silvia Moreno-Garcia writes about Mexico City in this futuristic world is like it feels so real. The grittiness, the poverty of Mexico City, the inequality are all there and explored to some degree. There's also very feminist themes here. The main character is at times incredibly unlikable, and that was amazing to read. Actually, like I loved that. It was just an amazing story. Like I loved it. I cannot say enough good things about it. The next book I read from Silvia Moreno-Garcia came out in 2019. This is Gods of Jade and Shadow. And this is set in Mexico, and it's this young woman opens up a box, and she lets out the Mayan god of death, who is in a lifetime feud with his brother. And the book is basically a travel adventure through Mexico, as this young girl Cassiopeia is helping this god, the Mayan god of death, and it deals with class in Mexico, with gender dynamics and the barriers that exist for Cassiopeia as a poor woman. And it also explores, belief in the gods and what the world of the gods is like. The ending was pure perfection, I thought. I really enjoyed Gods of Jade and Shadow, and I think this is out of all of the Silvia Moreno-Garcia books, I think this is the one that most people will actually really, really like. The next book I will talk about is Mexican Gothic. This one I think is a little bit more hit miss, even though this is the bestseller and the one that got the most attention from Silvia Moreno-Garcia, and this one was published in 2020. So this one is set in Mexico again, but it's set in a house in rural Mexico that is owned by a British family. They have come to Mexico City they have come to Mexico for mining, and they became really wealthy by mining in Mexico. And so colonialism is a very important theme. Gender is a very important theme. Silvia Moreno-Garcia always has feminist themes in her books, I have found, and that is true here. Our main character, Noemi, is, even though the book is set in the 50s, I believe, she is, we would recognize her as a very modern feminist woman even today. And her cousin has recently married this British guy, and things don't seem to be okay. Like the family's not adhering from her the way a family would expect to. And then she gets a letter from her that makes it clear that things are not okay. And so Noemi is sent to go see what's happening in this town. And the rest is whoa. Large chunks of this book, for the most part, this book is very Gothic novel-like. Like Noemi's in this town, she's in this house, and she's looking at the walls, and she's telling us what the wallpaper is like. She's telling us what the silver is like, what the family is like. I will link my standalone review of this book down below if you want to hear more, because I'm usually a very plot-driven reader. I need a lot of plot, and there's not a ton of plot in this book until the very, very end. Like the last 10% there is where all the plot happens. The rest of it is just slow, kind of atmospheric book, and then at the end everything's happening. It's jam-packed, and like once you start getting into the action at the end, you cannot stop reading. I could not stop reading. But like I said, I think because it's so slow at the beginning, I think this one is not for everybody in the same way that I think Gods of Jade and Shadow, I think it will appeal to more people because maybe the first 2 chapters are a little bit more scene setting, slower pace, and then it's an action adventure story. So I think more people will actually like this one. But my favorite Silvia Moreno-Garcia book that I read in 2020 was Untamed Shore. And it is the book that most people are kind of ignoring. And I'm like, no, please. This one got lost in between the publication of these other two. And I think this one is actually my favorite. So this one is set in a coastal town in Baja California, in which you're following Viridiana, and it's in the 1970s. And she works in the town as an interpreter, like a tourist guide and interpreter. And her mom just really wants her to get married. And Meridian doesn't want that. She doesn't want that traditional life. She wants to go explore the world. She is really into American cinema, into French literature. She wants to explore the world because she knows there's much more out there for her. And in come these American tourists who need some help with translation, and the older man fancies himself a writer and he wants an assistant. So she's like, all right, I'll go hang out with work for the Americans, make some money. Her mom doesn't want her to, and you get this book can be very atmospheric in that I feel like you get a really strong feeling of what this town is like. What being a coastal town in Baja California might be like, and what being poor and trying to fight your way into a wider world feels like for a young woman. Trigger warnings as well here, because the way that Viridiana interacts with this American family brings up a lot of strange things. That's basically like the mystery in here is this family, and who are they, and how they transform Viridiana's world. I'll leave it at that. And the ending, oh my god, there was Mexican Gothic had a very like Hollywood-esque kind of ending. And then you get books like Gods of Jade and Shadow, and then Untamed Shore, in which Silvia Moreno-Garcia gives you something else. It might not be totally unexpected for some readers, but it's something else. It's really interesting. There's a lot to dig into there, and I have really loved exploring Silvia Moreno-Garcia's writing. Let's see, a couple of these books, I think I was able to talk to Shannon because I think we read these books at almost the exact same time, and so we were able to chat about it without even meaning to buddy read them. But these are definitely books that I think are really great for buddy reading or for book clubs, because there are really great themes to dig into and explore. And that's the one thing that I have fallen in love with Silvia Moreno-Garcia. One, she's always writing Mexican characters. Her books are set in Mexico in one way or another, and I just love being able to read books like that just have that really strong Mexican sensibility. In a lot of ways, it's probably not even it's probably a transplant feeling of the way the things you connect to in Mexico. Silvia Moreno-Garcia lives in Canada and has lived in Canada now for a number of years, and so I think I really connect to her writing for that, because the way she writes about Mexico, it lights up all of my experience with Mexico as well, and so it becomes a really great reading experience for me. So I did get to meet Silvia Moreno-Garcia when she came to Southern California, and I got her to sign all my books. So the only one that's not signed is Mexican Gothic, because they hadn't arrived yet. But I got so tongue-tied in a way that I don't get tongue-tied with authors. I've met other authors that I really love and admire, and I haven't gotten tongue-tied with them, and I did with Silvia Moreno-Garcia. So she has no clue who I am, but I feel like she writes for me. She writes for me. I connect very much to her themes and the Mexico that she writes, and the female characters that she writes are just amazing. So I will stop gushing about her and ask you to let me know if you've read any Silvia Moreno-Garcia. Ask you how you feel about her writing. Let me know what your favorite books of 2020 were, because maybe I'd like to add them to my 2021 list, and maybe they'll become a favorite for me as well. Also, thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.